Welcome to Salento with Love and welcome to Palazzo Bella. I'm Davide Mengoli. Episode 2 of Palazzo Bella will actually show you how really the things that run under the skin of a building have been put together. I always say that this is the most important part of the work, the electrical, the plumbing, the thinking, because after the skin, which is the plaster and the paint, gets applied, it's very difficult really to make changes. So, should we see what's happened? Well, you probably remember that the floor wasn't in this condition in episode 1, and it was very important to create a level substrate to accommodate the underfloor heating. Very often a mistake is made to apply the underfloor heating insulation onto a surface that is not even, and then you are literally bringing the problem forward to the next stage. In this particular case, after the plumbing and the electrics were done and checked, the cement base is being applied, leaving exactly the amount of space that is necessary to accommodate the underfloor heating panel and the tile or the cement or whatever the finish is on top. In fact, if we look at the surface here and if we look at the gap that has been left, we literally have enough to accommodate the 5 centimeter insulation panel, the screed that goes over the top, and the tile or the microcemento or wherever the finish that goes on top. This is very important, and this is really a lot of the planning that goes into refurbishing a property, getting your levels right, because that will change potentially the height of your doors, the way the layout of the kitchen. So it's very important to do these calculations right. And so after this process is done, then it's time really to start closing all these cuts and bruises that have been created in order to accommodate the new electrical system and the new plumbing system. I can hear some knocking upstairs. Should we see what they're doing? What are they doing? Well, you may think sometime that you have plaster on the wall and it's just a matter of sanding it down, filling the holes, but it doesn't work like that. That plaster has been on the wall sometimes for 50, 60 years when you touch it. In some particular cases, like for example on these walls, we've realized that the quality is good, so it will be treated and it will be saved. But very often, if you really want to work or if you really want a job that has longevity, then it's better to remove the old plaster. Some walls that look like a spaghetti junction because of the new plumbing, in this particular case electric, plumbing, gas, servicing the boiler. So even if the plaster is good, like it is for example on some of the other walls, it's still important to remove the entire amount of plaster that is on the wall, and then for the new render and then for the mesh, because otherwise it doesn't matter how good your plaster is, you're still going to see lines and little elements. So in this particular case, it's always good to tell your plasterer to remove everything and just apply the new plaster. But let's go and see what's happening upstairs where plaster has been applied all through the week. Let's go. remember this wall. Only a few days ago they were there hacking it along and removing the entire plaster, and now the new plaster has been applied, is now going to dry. But what about the room? This black plaster that you see, or the render, it's literally a mix made of sand and cement. Actually, in the old days they used to mix the sand and cement. Now it comes in bags and it's got all the chemicals in it, and so obviously the plasterers are not working like they used to, but also the product, it's much better. But this is what they call the black. And then on top of this, they need to then apply the fine plaster. So when it comes to walls like this, where some of the original plaster has been saved and the bit that was just hollow has been removed, they still need to mesh it and then apply the fine finish, which is the white, which then gets painted and finished at the end. But what an incredible job. And also, wherever you do, whatever you do, you're always producing mountains of rubble, which then needs to be removed, and it needs to be done properly, and it costs money. Every time removing it by hand, especially if you're on the first floor, you've got to bring it down, but also disposing it, you get charged by a ton. But sometimes people don't produce rubble because they don't want to pay for it, but at the same time they're leaving things on the walls or they're riding it in the building. So very, very good to then make sure that the rubble gets disposed properly. Now here in the bathroom, it is important after the old plaster it is removed for these beads to be applied. And what are these beads doing? They've been leveled with a laser. And what these beads are doing, they're actually allowing the plaster to work from one bead to another, making sure that the wall is dead straight and in line, because otherwise when he then comes to put your tiles on, then the tiler is definitely going to have major issues and he's not going to be happy, and the end result is not going to be great if the wall are not dead straight. So this is what they call piombare. It comes from lead, piombo, lead. In the old days, you know, they used to put a nail and drop the lead down and put it straight. So that word still remains the same when they say they need to piombare I muri. They need to straighten the wall. And it's not about making it look straight, it needs to be straight. Now what happens to these beads? Just make sure that whoever is doing this job for you removes the beads and they don't get left behind the tiles because they will rust. So they then get removed and the tiles get applied. But let's go and see next door where this has actually happened already. And here, this bathroom, it's huge. But you'll now get to see really what happens to these beads, which are embedded into the plaster and they will be removed. And that's exactly what it's doing at the moment. By doing that, it's making sure that the walls are dead straight, because sometimes they may look straight to the eye, but then when the tiles are applied and things are not really where it needs to be, creating a huge issue. So this is a very, very important part of the job. So yes, the plaster gets removed, and it's not just about putting a little bit of render on it. It's about piombare I muri. So it's about making the walls dead straight. And to be in the middle of January and to have this blue sky and these temperatures, I must admit, I came back from Indonesia and I thought, oh my God, it's so cold here. But now 17, 16, 17, 18 degrees. I mean, you could just have a little shirt. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. But anyway, we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about this room that here up on the roof terrace for many, many decades was probably just a storage area. And now it's going to become a wonderful space that allows you to enjoy the blue sky of Salento. And well, from when we saw it last time, I think we've seen an incredible amount of improvement, all the plaster, because this room, being a storage area, it was never plastered. It was almost falling to pieces, and it's all been plastered. But I would like to probably draw your attention on something that was done here. And this wasn't part of the scope, but I just thought, you know what, those steel potrelle or girders that were actually put there probably 100 years ago, I wasn't too sure, although the stone is locked inside. But I just thought, you know, well, you know what, if you're going to do so much work, it's better to be absolutely certain that you can give longevity to a property. So 4 stills have been put in, they've been treated, because you're not going to see them anymore. Once the frame gets fitted and the rock wall goes in between and the plasterboard closes it all off, then you'll have a beautiful super flat surface, but at the same time you'll have a surface that you don't have any access anymore. Now if you can see also this mesh, this metal mesh has been applied as well. The idea of the mesh is that because the walls are not rendered or plastered, but even if they were plastered, if little debris or anything should disconnect or come loose over a period of the years, then it would get trapped there, it wouldn't come through, it wouldn't damage your board, it wouldn't do anything. It just keeps the entire thing together. This would just offer a super guarantee that for decades, maybe a century or more, everything will stand and everything will stay in the right place. So very important when you're doing a refurbishment to think ahead. Again, this area here, which is going to be a little bathroom, so we'll have tiles, needs to be rendered in a way just like we've seen in the rest of the house, where the walls are super straight. So this is important again to do, to make sure that the tiler and the job gets finished at a very, very high standard. So Palazzo Bella episode 2, it's coming towards the end. I believe really that it's incredible the amount of progress and things have been done in the right way and in the right order to make sure that the end result, it's really a high standard. Things that potentially we didn't cover in episode 2, it's really the thickness of the floors or the cement that has been applied on the 2 floors, because one floor upstairs may have a different type of flooring than what's going downstairs, and you really need to think ahead, because otherwise again everything shifts. So very important when you're doing a refurbishment of this level, and I truly believe at this stage now that refurbishment at this level are actually more engaging and more needing than actually building a property from scratch, you know, buying a plot of land and actually do the foundation and go up from scratch, because you need to take things off and then put things back on. But also you are adding centuries of life to buildings that are so special. They will build in a way that today we can only dream of. So allowing them to survive and to stand for centuries ahead, for newer generation to be aware of that type of architecture, I think it's a responsibility. Anyway, I really hope you've enjoyed episode 2. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, don't just be a watcher, subscribe to the channel, press the little bell. That way you can actually support the channel and also being updated about the amazing developments here in Salento. Well, this takes me to the end of episode 2. I wonder what episode 3 is going to be about, but I think you're going to see some amazing transformations. In the meantime, you just make sure that you do the most important thing, which is stay safe wherever you are.